After e4, e5, knight c3, knight c6, f4. In this video we're going to go through all the things we haven't gone through so far, so we can finally close the Vienna saga. Black playing knight f6. Let's start with this one. Knight f6 now, this is a mistake, as we know you have to take, and after the knight takes back you gain more space in the center with d4. Now we're going to go through a move we haven't seen at all. We have seen knight c6, we're going to see one variation of that, but we also need to see what happens after knight g6. Things here change a little bit. Now you still play e5, and now this black knight has got nowhere to go except g8. Now you go on with developing knight f3. White is already much better. Here we need to see the crucial move by black, the only move that doesn't lose the game immediately, because you're going to play bishop f7, bishop c4, attacking f7, knight g5. The king is going to castle, and you're going to have loads of pressure over f7. So let's look at this move, d5. This is the best move by black. Okay, now you have to give up on that plan, and you got to play d3, bishop to d3. So let's look at two ideas now. If black plays, let's say, bishop to g4, pinning the knight, developing, right? Castle. And after the knight finally comes into the game, knight e7, the idea of maybe going to c6, or maybe f5, or maybe bishop to f5, trade without bishop. Just developing, right? You attack this bishop. Now the bishop will have, okay, if the bishop takes, then queen to f3, and there's too much pressure over f7, you're completely winning, and it's impossible for black to defend that. So the only thing left to do is bishop to e6, knight to g5, queen to d7, developing and allowing castle. Too late, queen to h5, and you'll see what happens. Okay, h6 is a completely useless move to remove the knight, because you can simply take the bishop, and the pawn can't take because you have one and two attackers over the knight, so you're winning material. So black has to take back with the queen, but now you play knight to b5, attacking c7, and you can't even castle because there's an attack on a7, and a king to d8 to stop the knight from going to c7 is met with simply bishop to d2, developing, and after a6 to kick the knight away, you go back to c3. Now, find a move for black. There is nothing that can be done. This pawn cannot push because the double attack on the knight. The bishop can't move. This rook can't move. None of these pawns can move. The queen could be moving around, but then she would leave the f7 square available. The king might move, or this rook might move from here to here, but it wouldn't make any difference. So let's look at the only move that makes sense. Knight c6, with the idea of developing this bishop. The knight's targeting d4, but you just play bishop to f5. Position evaluated plus 550 or something like that. The queen will have to move away. You can hit d5. It's completely game over. And back in this position, when we took the bishop and queen takes back and we play knight b5, just to make it clear, king castling, you might say maybe our opponent will give up a pawn and then carry on with the game. Yes, that is possible, but the position is still evaluated plus 5. Like, the advantage is huge. Check, king moves, and now you simply return to b5 with the knight. And black king is unsafe forever. This bishop can't develop, so let's say knight to c6 now, for instance, c3, solidifying the pawn chain. And the idea of the white player is to play b4, bishop to d2, a4, a5, a6. So you've got a great advantage. For more information of how to exploit such positions, just watch the entire saga of the Vienna and everything will be clear. So in this position, we said that h6 is a useless move. So after knight g5 and queen to d7, we played queen to h5. What about castle now? Looks better, but now you have a stunner move. Rook takes in f7. Boom! How about that? And there's a crucial advantage. You're also threatening all sorts of tactics, like bishop takes knight. If pawn takes, you're hitting the rook. If knight takes, then you're hitting the queen. So it looks like this has to be taken. But now knight to f7, attacking the two rooks. So let's make an example. If knight to c6 developing, right, bishop f5 wins the queen. So just an example of what we're threatening. This knight is stuck in that square because of bishop f5. If king to b8, removing from the potential threatening diagonal, bishop to g5, we don't even take the rooks. We don't need to do that at the moment. And now after h6, attacking the bishop, what's the plan? Take this knight. This pawn can't take because of the queen. He has to take they have to take the bishop back, and the knight is now defending the queen, so the bishop's under attack, but now you take this rook. And nothing works here. Basically, if knight takes back in here, in h8, you take the rook, take back, and now rook to f1. We'll close the line there, it's completely winning. Again, position evaluated as if white was up 2 pieces. It's a crazy evaluation. And here in this position, you might argue, what about taking the bishop? Well, okay, knight takes back. Again, white is completely winning. We're up material and much better position. Black can't threaten anything, like queen to f7 or queen to e8 to pin the knight. They're both met with queen takes pawn. And yeah, again, we're up a piece, so let's move on. And let's make a recap, actually. So, okay, the variation where black just puts the knight and only a pawn in the center, you take d4, knight g6, e5, knight g8, knight f3, and now d5, the best move, bishop to d3. What about, instead of bishop g4, what about knight e7 to get back into the game, castle, and after bishop to f5, potentially trading with our strong bishop, knight to g7 once again, and it's compromised now. Bishop takes is the best move, queen takes back, and now we're hitting the square f7, and it's too strong of an attack. What about f5? Take en passant, take back, and now knight e6, attacking the queen, queen d7, and now recapture this pawn. It looks crazy because, well, okay, bishop g7 isn't really possible. Rook to g8, preparing maybe bishop g7, or simply just developing the rook. Knight to b5, double attack on c7. Okay, rook to c8 is the only move, so take this one. Rook to a8, go back. Rook goes back to c8, bishop g5, finishing development. Bishop to g7, attacking our very strong rook. Take the knight, sacrificing. And there's no way to take back. If you take back with the pawn, rook to e1, with the threat of taking the knight, and then you got discovered checks, and it's a disaster. There is nothing here that black can do. Black maybe can play king to f7 to try and get away from the problems, but still you play knight to c5 now, and you've got a lot of attack over e7. You've also got an attack on the queen. The attack on the queen is inevitable. So in this position, what if the knight takes back? Okay, again, rook to e1. What to do? The best move according to the engine would be bishop to e5, because the bishop is defended. So if you take with the rook, black will at least give you 2 pieces for the rook, and then carry on with the game. But now white plays queen to f5. Let's make an example. If bishop to d6, right, then knight g7 is checkmate. So we've got nasty discovered checks available. What to do? c6 maybe, attacking this knight. Knight g7 was going to happen anyway. Check, sacrifice, because rook can take. It's a crazy variation. Knight to d6, another sacrifice. This is so insane. Queen has to take, but now you can take the rook with check. Queen can't block, we got a bishop as well, so king to f7, take this one, and after queen to c5 check, just move the king. You're 100% safe, nothing's going to happen. Queen, if black plays, let's say, just to keep in mind the threat, if queen to c4, right, just to make an example, e6 is checkmate. So what to do to stop that? What about knight f8 to stop that check? e6 anyway, king to g6, e7, queen to b4, attacking the rook, last attempt, too late, you're gonna promote with check, right? There was nothing else to do. So let's look at another line, very similar, but still has to be seen because, okay, knight takes back, d4, what about the knight going back to c6? We have seen it in the past, but after e5 and knight back to g8, knight f3, and black playing d6, we played bishop to b5. Now, in this position, in the past, we went through bishop to d7, unpinning the knight. In this position, now let's go through a6, attacking the bishop right away. Okay, bishop a4, and after b5, here you have to go. Obviously, you don't have that sacrifice here with the idea of playing d5 because black can play knight e7. This is not the case. So bishop to b3 now, and now here's a crazy variation that is about to happen. This is how crazy and sharp the Vienna Gambit is. Let's make an example. If black attacks the bishop, knight a5, completely normal looking move, you just take here, check. King takes, knight g5, check. And now what to do? Okay, king to g6, you play h4. The idea of playing h5, and that wins the game on the spot, as you can tell. So what about h5 by black? Castle. Okay, nothing to do now. If bishop to g4, to make an example, comes with an attack on the queen, queen d3 gives a checkmate very soon. What about bishop to f5, giving more protection to the king? Boom, rook takes. King takes. Then again, queen d3 check. The king is forced to go to g4, and then queen h3 is checkmate. So that means that the king couldn't really take the bishop. So what about knight to h6, attacking the rook? Well, okay, just go back to f2. White is completely winning, as you can tell. And back in this position, we went through knight a5, bishop check, king takes, knight g5. What about the king goes back to e8? Does it make any difference? Queen f3, you're hitting the checkmate spot. Knight to h6, defends it, but now you take the rook. So it was impossible to stop that from happening. Bishop to e7 to speed up development. Take this pawn. Crazy enough, because we're giving away a knight. And this cannot be taken, this pawn cannot be taken with the queen, because then the bishop in c8 will fall. And with the bishop, it reduces the initiative. You're going to just go on, castle, and so on. You're completely winning. What about black just takes our piece? Then, well, you just simply take back. There's nothing here. The queen can't take here, because then you take this one and you simplify. If the queen moves away to d7, you just castle. Position evaluated plus 10, if that wasn't enough. You're about to play rook check, and yeah. So let's make one more recap and we close this line forever. And I've got another line that is also just as crazy. Take, knight takes, d4, knight c6, e5, knight g8, knight f3. And after d6, challenging our center, bishop e5, the bishop gets attacked, you go back. b5, bishop to b3. So what about black takes in e5? Okay, queen to e2. Let's put pressure on that square. Now, it is not a problem for, if we get this pawn taken with the knight with an attack on the queen, you just take back. The pawn can't take its pin, so after queen takes, then queen to f3 ends the game, because you're attacking the rook and the f7 square with disaster. And it's unstoppable. And instead, in this position, instead of knight d4, what about b4, attacking the knight? Queen to c4, ignores it because you're attacking this one, and you're also attacking the square f7 with the checkmate threat. A move like queen f6 is immediately losing, because knight d5 attacks the queen. You're preparing all the problems of the world. The queen will have to move away, and then you can take the knight, completely winning. If instead of queen f6, black plays queen to d7 to protect the knight and to protect f7 square, then bishop to a4 finalizes the attack on that piece. Bishop to b7 only move to protect the knight, but now you play d5. One very brief mention has to go to the move d5. So this one, take, d4, knight c6, e5, and knight g8, knight f3. What if black plays d5? Now, same thing, you just play bishop to b5. And when the bishop gets attacked, you just trade, take, and now you castle. Position is already much better for white. Black has no moves to develop. Bishop e7 will stop the knight from being able to ever develop. Knight to e7, but then you got the knight moving, and you got so much attack over f7. So let's look at bishop to g4, kind of the only thing left to do at this point. Well, okay, attack the bishop. When the bishop takes you, queen f3, you've got a great advantage, as you can tell. So if the bishop moves away, seems to be making sense, of course, knight to e2. And we're threatening to simply go to g3 or f4, it depends. So a move like g6 is not possible because you trap the bishop. So let's go on with development. Knight to e7. Okay, you just play knight to f4, attacking the bishop, and you are going to trade that bishop away. So let's see, bishop back to g6, because if the bishop takes, it just helps you develop. So bishop to g6 now, and you can simply play c3, solidify the pawn chain. And there are no moves for black, no moves that make any sense. Knight to f5 is not threatening anything. c5 cannot be played because you just play knight to g5 with the idea of simply removing this bishop and then going to f7, and that's already unstoppable. It cannot be stopped at this point. So what about rook to b8? Well, you play queen to e1, and now again knight g5 is a huge threat. You threaten to take here, then go to f7, it's game over very soon. What if black plays h6 to stop that from happening? Well, now you focus on e6 then. There is no coming back, this is a deadly position. Pawn takes back is a suicide, as you can tell. What about queen to d6, getting the pieces to play, but knight to e5, so much attack over f7. The pawn will have to be taken, but then you can take the bishop and you can take it from there. By the way, I need to make a brief mention of a move that I encountered recently. Here, after knight c6 and f4, black can play a gambit sometimes, d5. This is a free pawn, but you gotta be careful, because you might go down in development. Because the thing is that this move does give you a free pawn, but also allows the development of the bishop very quickly. So here you have to take. And now, after knight to d4, it's kind of scary, but still you have to take this pawn. And after bishop to f5, puts more attack over the square, c2, you play d3. Best move now, knight to e7, to put more attack over this pawn and get back in the game. Bishop to g5, you have to pin it. h6, attacking the bishop, bishop h4. g5, removing the bishop. Okay, well, bishop to f2, attacking the knight. c5 is the only move to save the knight. g4 attacks the bishop will have to move. Bishop to h7, remaining relevant. Bishop to g2, we have to speed up development. Knight to g6, attacking this pawn, also landing in f4, very strong move. How to deal with this? Knight g to e2, we have to give up that pawn. Bishop to g7, these are all computer moves, best moves in order to see if this game can be, this gambit is actually productive for our opponent. But here you take the knight, pawn takes back, bishop takes back, and now the knight can take back in e5. Queen 2-2, pinning. Queen to e7, I'm pinning. Long castle. Castle. Best by white is h3, solidifying that pawn. f5 by black, most aggressive reply, and here we close the line by taking this pawn. Bishop takes back and simply king to b1. And white survived this crazy gambit. We got a passed pawn and a winning position. It looks very sharp, but we're up 2 pawns. There's too many things, too many moves that can happen now, so you're gonna have to take it from there. One last line has to be seen about this opening, where on the third move black takes the pawn. As we know, we played knight f3. Now in the past we went through d6, and then we obviously played d4, and then the plan with g5 to hold the pawn forever, right? Here we play d5 straight away, as we remember. In this variation though, straight after black taking in f4, you play knight f3. What if black plays g5 right away? Now you remember that here you play g3, you gotta challenge this pawn, because otherwise this pawn is going to be holding forever. And we've seen so much stuff in the previous videos with g4, knight h4, f3, and so on. It's a crazy variation. Make sure you watch the entire saga. What if black takes the pawn? Okay, take back, and now d6. Now here there's a transposition. It's too late for you to play d4, d5 plan. Well, you still need to play d4 now. And now let's look at this annoying move. Bishop to g4. Okay, pinning the knight. You have to play bishop e2. And after queen to d7, developing d5, attacking the knight. Knight e5, and you can take it. Here obviously you got double attack on the bishop, so black can't take back. He has to take our bishop first. You take the queen, they take the queen, and now you take the bishop, and you're up material. You see, if the bishop just goes back, you will play knight takes pawn in h7. You're up a piece, and this knight is not going to be taken. You'll just have to develop the queen and move the king away, and then the rooks will be protecting each other, so you can move the knight. If instead of that move black captures the knight, then you take this bishop and you're up material. What if instead black plays bishop f3 with an attack on this rook? You just take in h7, and you're completely winning, as you can tell.